This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by State Senate Transportation Committee Chair Jeremy Cooney, a Rochester-area Democrat. Welcome back to the show, Senator.
Thanks for having me, David.
So the governor proposed and then scrapped language in her budget that would have allowed for the limited deployment of autonomously operated for-hire vehicles outside of New York City, basically a driverless taxi or Uber. Is there a middle ground between what the governor has proposed and what critics of the plan, namely labor organizations, might agree to, which wouldn't undercut the very idea of having a driverless car? Or is this kind of an all-or-nothing proposition as you see it?
Well, I certainly hope there is some middle ground. I was disappointed in the governor's decision to remove this out of the 30-day amendments in her executive budget. But look, I do see that as New York's very complex transportation marketplace evolves, that there is going to be an ecosystem in which there are driverless cars or autonomous vehicles as well as human-driven cars. And so I don't think it's an all-or-nothing approach where you have no Ubers, Lyfts, taxis, black cars, and all, Waymos or Teslas or what have you. I think it's going to be, some sort of amalgamation of mixes. And I think if you've heard from some of the supporters of what the governor had originally proposed, a lot of it was in rural settings,
right,
making sure that where there aren't available workforce issues for hire vehicles.
Well, and that's what I mean by the all or nothing idea, because there are people who are trying to protect jobs in the commercial industry, and I have to imagine they are indifferent of whether they're actually driving the vehicle or whether their members are just sitting in the vehicle and not actually doing anything. But that, again, defeats the purpose. So do you think there's a world in which a measure could get through that wouldn't require someone sitting in that quote-unquote driverless car?
I think that there can be.
Okay.
I think look, we're having conversations with our partners and friends in organized labor to think about what does retraining look like, reskilling? Are there job opportunities outside of being in a physical automobile? The technicians, the training, the fleet management. Could we get current drivers into those types of roles? What are the salaries associated and the benefits associated with those types of roles? But we're also thinking about, is there maybe a percentage? Maybe we start where we, make sure that there are a certain percentage of vehicles that have a human operated driver, and then we kind of do a set aside for some autonomous vehicles to come into the marketplace, but not take it over. We're also, being very, very clear with our partners in labor that this is really for hire vehicles only, not those 10,000 pounds and above type of vehicles. So that excludes trucking, that excludes any sort of public transit opportunities. We want to make very clear that our legislation, what the governor had originally proposed, what we're continuing to work on, is really about those passenger for hire vehicle situations.
And this proposal didn't just come out overnight. We've had years of testing, and you actually talked to the DMV commissioner about whether they were satisfied with those results, and they said from their perspective, from the state police perspective, this is all working. So the people who are arguing against it, is there any safety issue that you could make a good faith argument about, or is it solely an issue of jobs?
No, absolutely. And this is exactly why I have been a proponent of this legislation since 2022. But as you noted, David, the testing program in New York started in 2017. Last year alone, there were over 40,000 automobile-related deaths, countless more accidents, pedestrians, cyclists hit. Why is that? Really, since the pandemic, we have seen an increase in aggressive driving behavior, not just here in New York, but all across the United States. We have seen more distracted driving with cell phones and technology inside the automobile. And so we know that whatever the company is, but these autonomous vehicles can increase safety on our roads because they're not speeding. They are stopping and braking when, people or bikes or skateboards come in the middle of the street. So, we believe that this should be based around safety. Obviously, we're thinking about the jobs and the displacement impact, but this should be about saving lives and keeping our roads and our pedestrians and our cyclists safer.
In polling this proposal, the governor's team said one of the reasons was they feel like there isn't support for it in the legislature. You're obviously interested in this. What do you feel is the temperature of your Democratic colleagues in the Senate? Were they actually opposed to this, or do you think this is something where you have 32 votes to support something like this just within the Democratic conference?
I think, look, this is a new form of technology. We've come a long way since 2022 where people thought, what, self-driving cars? This is crazy, right? I think people have now traveled to other parts of the country, whether they've been out to the West Coast or in Arizona. Now there are operators in Pennsylvania, in Washington, D.C., down in Miami. The more people are traveling and they've experienced this firsthand, they become a little more comfortable with the technology and they can kind of see the benefits of utilizing this technology.
Does that include your colleagues in the Senate?
Yeah, no, I've heard this directly from some of my colleagues. Some of my colleagues still think this is weird and scary and they don't want anything to do with it.
Sure.
But they're also saying, some of them say, okay, I won't take it, but I don't necessarily want to block it for my constituents, right? I'm not personally comfortable there, but I'm open to the concept. I think when we talk about the number of traffic-related accidents, people take this as an opportunity for safety. And I think we, especially in the Senate Majority Conference, have really been leading the way with worker safety. Senator Gennardis has been doing great work on speeding, making sure that there's pedestrian safety, especially for our New York City colleagues who have the density of population, worried about accidents and fatalities. So, I think we can move people in this space. I think there needs to be more conversation outside of the budget process where we look at legislation I carry with Assembly Member Cunningham, who's also a great advocate for this legislation. Of course, he's downstate based, right? He's in Kings County. So we're working through those conversations and hoping to get to a compromise.
So it sounds like maybe some more whipping to do in the legislature then.
Always more whipping to do.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with State Senate Transportation Committee Chair Jeremy Cooney. So I want to turn to the public transit systems outside of New York City, and one of the issues you brought up was the idea of a new dedicated revenue stream to meet the operating needs of those transit systems, particularly in upstate and rural areas. And one of the things that's being discussed now is this idea of a $25 annual registration fee on vehicles. Can you talk about why you think that makes sense as a way to fund the transit needs? Obviously, there's something similar in the New York City area, but New York City has a much more robust options in terms of transit that people could take as an alternative, so they maybe don't even need a vehicle. So why is this a good idea outside of that system?
Well, let's start about the why. Recognizing that transportation, regardless of whether you're upstate or downstate, is a public utility. People need transportation to pick up their children from school, to get to work, to get to a doctor's appointment. And oftentimes we hear outside of New York City, we hear the frequency, the routes, they just don't work for me. I would take the bus, but it comes every 45 minutes. I can't live my life around that. Or
Sure.
the bus doesn't come out to where I live. Or my job is in an area more rural where there isn't public transportation connection. If we were able to fully fund what we call STOA, or State Operating Aid, to public transit authorities. So here in Albany, it would be CDTA. In my neck of the woods in Rochester, it would be RTS. Right? We would be able to increase the frequency, increase those connection points, better work with our large employers to get their employees on public transit, creating innovative systems that speed up the process. So that the mayor of New York City used to talk about fast, free buses, right, in his mayoral campaign. We could have faster buses in upstate New York. That requires a level of funding that New York City has been able to benefit from that the rest of the state has not. So what we're talking about here is increasing, and it will take place over time, David, but increasing the surcharge on auto renewal or auto registration in the DMV process. This is something that's already done in New York City. We're just looking to apply it from an equity perspective outside of New York City. So for essentially, the way that I tell folks is for the cost to fill up one tank of gas, approximately $50, right? Every 2 years, for that one cost, you are now investing in public transit in your community. And you may not need that public transit for yourself, but maybe an aging parent needs it. Maybe a person that you love that has a physical disability might need access to it. Maybe you'll need it if your car breaks down, right? So you're investing in a public transit ecosystem that works for everybody. And I think oftentimes when people look at New York City, and you said this in your earlier comments, you look at their built-out infrastructure, right? Forget about just buses and subways and more options. They have stops every couple of blocks.
Sure,
right?
you're not walking a mile.
You're not
to your
walking a mile,
destination.
right? Exactly. We could have that type of infrastructure if we had these types of funds to build that out. So, I think this is our way of saying that no matter where you live in New York State, you deserve access to quality public transportation, and this is a way to dedicate revenue to do that.
I think a lot of people would not have an issue with a $50 cost every 2 years if they actually saw that vision executed. But what we've seen, say, with the MTA is every couple years they have to find a new revenue stream. Hey, let's get some casino money into this. Hey, we've got now 18 dedicated revenue streams. Hey, let's increase this payroll mobility tax. Is there any reason to expect that this would not be a similar situation in the upstate transit system, and we'd be having a conversation a few months from now or years from now about the need for another dedicated stream?
I don't think so. I mean, look, the last major change we did to dedicated revenue in upstate New York was, I believe, in 2019 when we did a surcharge on rental cars, which was, helpful, but it's not where we need to be. I mean, statutorily, when you look at how the governor puts out her budget and the downstate versus upstate operating aid, they're not just arbitrary numbers or political decisions. They are funded with dedicated revenue sources. Upstate New York is relying on that rental fee charge, but we're also looking at outdated technology like long-distance telephone service.
Sure.
I don't think most 22-year-old bus riders know what MCI or long-distance telephone services even are. Right, exactly. So, again, this is just what's good for New York City is good for the rest of New York State. I understand the sensitivities to affordability. The governor has weighed in on that. I certainly respect her ability to want to keep New York affordable. But what we're really talking about here is just allowing upstate New York to benefit from what New York City already has.
Well, lastly, I want to turn to the idea of road and bridge maintenance or upkeep. And clearly, you're looking for additional capital dollars above and beyond what the governor is proposing. That's a recurring issue. Is there anything, though, that we need to do to better improve how we're investing this money? Is there anything that could be done to stretch our capital dollars, whether it's for potholes, whether it's for the CHIPS money that goes to local governments? Is there any way to make that money go further? Is there anything that you see as limiting the impact of our investment? Because we're already spending a lot of money for technical terms.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think we're spending enough money.
It is still a lot. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions, then adds up to billions. And
look, the reality is, we live in a state, knock on wood, and hopefully we don't experience a lot of these extreme weather-related events in terms of forest fires and mudslides and hurricanes and tornadoes. We have tough winters, obviously, but our roads and our bridges are facing the climate impact, right? We've seen more flooding, especially down on Long Island or in the Hudson Valley. We've seen, again, potholes, but all those types of winter weather-related infrastructure challenges, which requires us to do more maintenance. A lot of our roads and bridges are in rated fair and poor condition.
They're also very old.
And they're old.
Ma Bell's around.
So, I think to answer your question directly, two things I have noticed that we could do in addition to putting in more resources. I am supporting $250 million increase in the CHIPS budget, which goes to our local roads. I'm supporting $950 million for our state core roads program, state roads. But I think in addition to that, we have to let these contracts out faster. So we're putting money as lawmakers. We're working hard to get money into the budget. These contracts aren't going out. CHIPS money is going out. That's good. But there are other funds where the money is not being spent at the local municipal level. We want to make sure that these dollars are actually being spent. The road work is getting done in the year that we've allocated the funds for. The other thing that I would say is we look at the type of materials that we use to do this work. So technology is changing. We often think about things like autonomous vehicles, but we should also be thinking about the actual materials that are used to put onto our roads, different types of cements and concretes and asphalt fillings that are more environmentally friendly, that have longer duration. So you don't have to do it every 2 years, right? Maybe it costs a little bit more up front, but you don't have to change the road for, 10 years, right? So that allows us to focus on those roads that really need help. So I think in the next 5-year DOT capital plan, I'm going to be looking at the type of materials that we're actually allocating use and that our DOT is going to be doing that work on so that we can have longevity in the work that we're doing.
Is there a reason why they wouldn't make those types of investments already? I mean, there's the idea of being a penny wise and a pound foolish,
Sure,
so
right.
maybe you're avoiding upfront costs. But are there other reasons, whether it's somebody knows the right person in the Hochul administration, that they're getting the contract,
Well,
or other
I certainly don't think
issues?
it's anything as that nefarious. I think it might just be we've always done it this way, so we're just going to keep doing it. And I want to challenge that,
Okay.
and I want to say, look, again, some of this materials that I'm talking about, this is new technology, new materials, new mixes, new compounds that have come about in the last 2 to 3 years. And so as we're being more environmentally conscious, as we're thinking about longevity and resiliency in our infrastructure, we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of that and being intentional with that, not just going along to get along or doing the same thing over and over again, but actually putting in the money to invest in the studies that show that this type of material does work for the long-term health of our roads.
Well, we've been speaking with State Senate Transportation Committee Chair Jeremy Cooney. He is a Rochester-area Democrat. Senator, thanks for visiting us in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.